Welcome to the Courage to Live podcast. My name is Josh Bitsko. I'm a retired police captain with 24 years of experience in Las Vegas. Currently, I travel the country and I teach people about leadership, courage, and resilience. I'm joined by my wife, Jenna.
Hi.
And today's a special podcast. We're going to talk about the active shooter at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2023, in December of 2023. It was right before I retired.
And we actually have a special guest today. LVMPD, Las Vegas Metro Police Department, they have started a podcast, and I saw recently that they did an episode with the lead investigator over the UNLV shooting. So we thought it would be a great idea if we invited a special guest today. He was actually the incident commander over this event, and we have him here, and his name is Josh Bitsko. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I know it was hard to get on. I've been really trying to get on. And also, if you can hear my voice, I'm getting over a cold, but we're going to do this podcast come rain or shine, no matter what we have going.
Yeah. I think a really good place to start would be describing where you were at the time, as far as where you were working, what your responsibilities were, and then run down a little bit of what happened.
Yeah. So at the time of this incident, I was the captain over South Central Area Command, which is the area command right next to the Mandalay Bay. But you have like Maryland Parkway, which is like central Las Vegas. And then it goes very far south into like the south end of Las Vegas, where it butts up with Henderson. And I had not been the captain of that area command for very long. Maybe a couple of months. Had just transferred there.
Can you explain what rank captain is? What does that entail?
Yeah, so as the captain, you are responsible for a geographic area of Las Vegas. Like there was a time I was a captain over the Convention Center Area Command, which was the Las Vegas Strip. And then I was a captain over our Wellness Bureau, so it wasn't geographical. I was just the commander in charge of making all of the decisions for creating this Wellness Bureau. And then, so, you basically are like a small chief of police over a geographic area. And Las Vegas is broken up into 10 geographic areas. So, as a captain, you're like almost like a politician. Like you have to have relationships with the, different city council members and county commission members. If you have anything of significance in your area, like UNLV, for example, I should have relationships with the chief of the UNLV police. And anytime there could be a co-response to something, building those relationships are an important part of that position. You are more an administrator than anything else. You have to run a budget. You have all the responsibilities with that building that is placed in that area, and then all the policing strategies that go along with it. It is one of those 24-hour-a-day jobs. My phone was ringing all the time, as you know. When something would happen at 1 a.m, my phone would ring and I'd have to respond to it.
And how many officers did you lead? How many were you in charge of?
So at the Convention Center, it was just over 300. That was the biggest one because it's such a lot. So many people come to the Las Vegas Strip. South Central Area Command, I think I had about 150 officers. And South Central is an interesting area because there's a mix. You have some, traditionally high crime areas, and then you have, other areas that are more suburb, and then some business areas. And like I said, a college, a school. And it is a very unique area command to work just because of that. It's not all one type of area. It's a mix of a bunch of different kinds.
And just to remind people, we talked about this last week, but what we're doing is formulating episodes so that you can understand these major experiences that kind of shaped Josh into the person he is today, but also these experiences that set him on a path to get help, to not just get help for himself, but because he wanted to change the way that he was operating for himself and his family and for the people around him. And all of these experiences led him to write a book and our next episode and the episode after that is going to be about the book and that process, and then what the book's about. And so what we're going to talk about today is also just another one of those major incidents that shaped who he is. And most police officers, most people don't have to go through, I mean, police officers have to go through many traumatic events, way more than other people. There's all kinds of different stats out there that vary of how many traumatic events an officer goes through during their time as a police officer. But for police officers in specifics, you don't have to respond to this many major incidents in your whole career. It's maybe one, if any, right? So Josh responding to major incidents over and over again also kind of shaped who he is and how his life has gone since.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have the unique experience of being the tactical response to like the 1 October incident, and then the incident commander over all the operations of like the one we're going to talk about today, or there was a mass stabbing on the strip that I was the incident commander for. So it gave me a unique perspective in policing to go at these major incidents that, yeah, most cops, you might go to one in your career, if that, say traditional real active shooter incidents. Effective in policing to go at these major incidents that, yeah, most cops, you might go to one in your career, if that, say traditional real active shooter incidents. And I have the experience of going from different points of view, right? I was incident commander, I was a tactical response, and both of those are stressful and unique in how, the impact that they have on you. And it really is, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm lucky to have been on all these events, but they did shape who I am today. And it gave me the ability to stand in front of a room of cops all the way up to chiefs of police and be able to connect with them because I have these experiences. And because, you look around the country, you look at critical incidents that happen pretty much everywhere in the United States when it comes to these active shooters, and you have cops that respond. Each of these events, you have the officers that are the tactical response, and you have the people that are in charge of them. And, a lot of times the officers act very brave, command does what they need to do, and then you have times when that's not as much the case. So being able to learn myself from both the operational standpoint of what I need to do to be successful, but then also the emotional standpoint and the effects that they had on me, because I was able to, through this process later in life, really look at my own mental health and how these incidents affected me, being able to come at it from both perspectives and connect with people in that way. So no, I wouldn't say that I was lucky for being on these events, but it did give me an experience, and that experience allows me to be more empathetic and develop relationships with people that have been on these as well, and have those conversations, and also help those that may be in a similar situation. And not just operationally. Yes, that's a big part of what we have to do in law enforcement and in life, is know what to do when these critical incidents happen. But at the same point, then what do you do after? What do you do when you're home that night and all the noise has stopped and you're sitting by yourself in the dark trying to process what you've been through? And I was in different places in my mental health journey through each of these events. So the 1 October I didn't handle very well after. I just wanted to shove it down. Whereas the UNLV, and we'll talk about it, towards the end of the podcast, of how I approached that differently to not have as much negative impact on my mental health afterwards.
So let's talk about what you were doing that day when you got call.
So I was sitting in my office, as captains do.
They don't do a whole lot.
Well, we do a lot. We just don't do a lot of, police work at that point in my life. And I heard on the radio shots fired at the UNLV campus. So UNLV is University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They have their own police department. They have, chief, rank, structure, and all of that. But they are 100% completely within the South Central Area Command. And university school police is They have difficult jobs because they take more of a prevention rather than apprehension standpoint towards policing, and they want to prevent more than they do apprehend. It's not about arrest numbers, it's not about statistics as much in that way of statistics, more about preventing any kind of crime from happening. And I had worked with UNLV before. We had some protests that I responded to and went out there with, and worked with their command staff. And I also worked with them on some wellness initiatives before, so I knew who worked there. But knowing that something, if let's say there's an actual active shooter, I had an understanding that as Las Vegas Metro, we would play a big part. We have the most resources, the most tools, the most training when it came to responding to active shooters. So I knew it would be a blended response, and we would have quite a bit of responsibility if something like that were to happen. So I'm at my desk and I hear the shooting at UNLV. And it's funny because, we live in a time when anytime there's a shooting in a crowded place, that initially comes out as an active shooter. Like we right after 1 October, we had a shooting at the Boulevard Mall in Las Vegas. And it was, I don't even think it was a shooting. It was just somebody with a gun inside. And we were so sensitive to active shooters after the 1 October shooting that turned into a very large incident, which I don't think before it would have. And so I had that understanding that there's a good chance that, okay, there's a shooting, but is this an active shooter? Is this somebody going through the school, randomly killing people until they're stopped by police? So it takes that minute of trying to get your head around what's going on. But I'll tell you, when you start hearing one for real on the radio, it doesn't take too long to understand that this is a legitimate active shooter incident. And what I heard was multiple people calling in, actually reporting victims. Somebody shot on the 3rd floor, somebody shot on the 2nd floor. And this was at Beam Hall at UNLV, the business school. And UNLV is my alma mater. I graduated from UNLV. So I had, yeah, I know. Yeah, any kind of college sports, I'm all about UNLV, and Jenna is not so much. So a household divided when it comes to sports. But I heard multiple people calling in, multiple reports of gunshots. Dispatch could hear gunshots in the background of the 911 calls. So then I know, okay, this is real. So I grab my gear. I'm in plain clothes, the one day a week that I generally wore plain clothes, not in uniform. And I jump in my car and I call my chief, my boss, he was in a meeting at the time, and I'm calling him. I'm like, hey, there's an active shooter right now at UNLV. It sounds legit. We need to roll. Took me a couple times to get through because, meetings and all that, but eventually did. And it started that whole process of, this was during the day, not, at 10 o'clock at night, like the 1 October incident. So everybody's working, everybody has a radio. I knew that there would be a large response to something like this. I'll tell you, so there were officers that, did a canine officers that work South Central Area Command that heard the call and were inside that building 56 seconds within the first 911 call. And one of when I teach about active shooter response, the two things that matter are how quick you neutralize the bad guy and how quick you get medical in. And I knew, based on the experiences that I've had, the training that I've had, that those were the priorities that we needed to save lives, to have a successful response. So all of my decisions at this point were directed towards like how quick we get our people in and how quick we get medical.
And you also made another phone call on your drive.
Yes. So as I'm driving to this, because the shooting's still happening, and yes, I'm a captain, and generally I'm not going to be the tip of the spear on something like this, but I knew that, okay, I'm still going to this critical incident. And honestly, you popped into my head was, I wanted her to know because I knew she also had a lot of friends on the police department at this time and was going to get a phone call that this was happening in my area. And I wanted to mitigate how much she was worrying as well. I did. So I knew that you still had friends on the police department, that somebody could call you and let you know what was going on in the area. And, usually historically, I was very like business when it was like, okay, I'm going on this call. I need to go handle this call. But you popped into my head, and I was worried you were going to be worried about me because although I, as a captain, am not generally the tip of the spear when it comes to responding to something like this. I also was very close. It was still happening while I was driving. And I also have a lot of bad luck when it comes to these types of events. So I did call you.
You did. And I think, so this is funny for me because I feel like this really illustrates the difference between men and women, because you call me and literally the only thing that you said was, I'm on my way to an active shooter, and hung up. And so I was working from home at the time, and I didn't have the news or anything on. I typically don't have that on. So I just remember being like, what? And trying to process it for a second, and knowing that you would go and you would, if you were the first one there, you're going to be in the building. Like you would not wait. And I knew that. So I was like, well, I'm going to just make sure that you know I love you. So I called him and I was like, I love you. And he's like, I love you too. Hung up. So for him, talking about this after, it was, I was thinking about her, and I called her and I told her where I was going, which I am super grateful that he thought about me in that moment. And then for me, I'm like, it was just so abrupt. It was so like, I'm on my way to an active shooter. The end. I was very much like, okay, I need a minute to process that, and also love you. So.
Well, and I think, yeah, I hung up. I'm like, oh, I'm such a good husband. I did such a good job. I called and let her know.
Nailed it.
But the other side of it is I'm in this mode where I get on the radio. I say I'm the incident commander. I say officers arriving on scene, put together a team, make your way to the suspect and take him out. Like in my head, I knew based on my experience that, some officers needed that nudge of this is what you have to do, even though we understand what we need to do on these. So I'm the incident commander. I want to make all these decisions that are safe for the cops, that are safe for the community. And then, okay, I'm going to call you and let you know, but I'm still in that like robot leader mode. Hey, I'm on my way to the active shooter. Bye, click. So.
And you were right. I did have friends on the department still, because at this point I had already left the department, and one of them immediately called me and said, Josh is on his way to an active shooter. He's okay. And they were listening to the radio traffic, so they were able to give me dates, which I really appreciated, because that's a benefit that I know not a lot of wives have, or spouses, in that moment.
So I would say then, knowing that, and I understand your concerns, but what were you feeling, like you emotionally? We talk about a lot about my emotions at different times, but I think it's important for those spouses that are living with first responder understand too. Like this is a big call, and so what are you feeling emotionally?
Well, so you and I, so we're both on our second marriages. So I had never experienced you in a patrol capacity. So we were not married or together when Josh was out on the streets. So I had never experienced that emotion or that feeling before. And it was honestly pure dread. Like my stomach just dropped to the floor, because again, knowing you, knowing your history, knowing that you would die if you had to save other people, that I was really hoping and praying there was another way for this to end. And I'm so glad that it ended. I don't want to say that because I'm not trying to get canceled, but the way that it ended was, I was thankful that you were able to be the incident commander and not the one running into the building that time. So I do, although, like I said, I really only experienced this one time, I do, my heart goes out to those spouses that have their husbands and wives out there all the time, because to get a call like that and then have to just sit and wait. And like I said, I had the luxury of having somebody giving me the play-by-play updates and knowing that you were not rushing into the building and that you were okay. So that, again, that's a luxury that people don't have.
Yeah. And then for me, like, I know I need to be 100% focused on what I'm doing. But at the same point, I also want to be empathetic to that for you, which is why you got the very cold call of, hey, I'm going to this, bye, click. So
you did great, sweetie.
Yeah, I'm doing so good. Growth. I am learning to be more empathetic. So the first team of officers made entry into the building, a canine officer, a couple patrol officers. And now I don't say the suspect's name on these, but I will say that the suspect on this was somebody that had been trying to get a job as a professor at UNLV, had experienced being a professor back east, had moved out here and was trying to become a professor at any of the colleges here in Las Vegas and was disgruntled and obviously dealing with mental illness and everything else on board that he was dealing with. And I'm not saying that to be empathetic to him. I'm just giving context to what he was. So he had created a kill list of people around the country, including some professors at UNLV, and he wanted to go in and take out professors. And so he was dressed like a professor, looked like a professor. He went into Beam Hall. He had a handgun with 10 loaded magazines on his person. He had parked on the south side of the building, made entry, went up to where the offices of the professors at UNLV, went into one of the offices of one of the people he was looking for, and that person was not there that day. And so
they had called out sick that day, right?
Yeah, I believe he was sick that day. And he then began randomly shooting professors, where he killed 3 and critically wounded another, like shot him in the stomach. And so you think about what I talk about on all of these, the chaos of, you have thousands of students in this building, thousands of students on the campus, and everybody is very, aware of active shooters and the threat they pose. So that first team of officers, I'm so proud that they got there. They knew what they needed to do, not because I told them to, but they knew the job that they needed to do, put together a team and make entry. They actually, as they're going in the building and ushering people out, they usher the suspect out because they were there so fast. They didn't have a suspect description. It was just, there's shooting going on. There's people down.
And he also looked like a professor, right? The way that he was dressed.
Didn't have a gun in his hand, appeared to be a professor in a building full of professors. I mean, you can't fault the officers for doing what they did. I call back to my experiences and what, you expect an active shooter to look like based on history and what's happened around the country. And so I probably would have done the exact same thing they did. So they make entry to make their way to where the shooting's happening and end up ushering the suspect out of the doors that they came into. And as the suspect exited, he was confronted by 2 UNLV police officers that were showing up. And they tried to call him over to them, and he didn't listen to commands, started to walk away, ended up pulling out his own gun, and there was an officer involved shooting where the UNLV officers, one of them shot and killed the suspect. Which, is, dark to talk about on these podcasts, but that is what often happens on these is, the suspects are, one of 3 things happen. They take their own lives, they're taken into custody by police, they're shot by police in a shootout. And all of those things are precipitated by a police response, which is why it's so important that our officers are trained and know how to overcome the hard emotions and that freezing so they can get there as fast as they can, operate safely, and end up taking the suspect out if they need to, which is why I said that on the radio as I did. So, almost immediately the suspect is taken out. I have teams of officers making entry. I arrive as that shooting's happening, set up a command post in front of UNLV, which is where all of the tactical operations, the decisions, all that are made, is right there in this command post. And the command post initially consisted of me. And because the officers that were there, I'm sending them forward, go forward, because we don't know. there's always a lack of intel at the beginning of these. How many suspects are there? Are there multiple? We know traditionally on these types of incidents, it's usually one suspect. I think San Bernardino and Columbine are two of the outliers where there's multiple suspects, but there's always reports of multiple suspects because you have multiple people calling on 911, giving different their perception of what's happening. So you have to treat it as though there are. So I talked earlier about the two priorities, how quick you can neutralize the suspect and then how quick you can get medical in. So as officers are forward, clearing out the building and making sure that, that we don't have any other suspects, we're identifying where victims are at. I'm now trying to focus on how to get medical forward in a safe manner as quickly as possible. We actually had a lieutenant show up and he said, I bruised his chest because I put my fingers in his chest and I said, I need these effing cars moved because all the patrol cars that people are showing up wanting to have an impact, they park their car and that can stop medical from having the ability to get in. I'm like, I remember saying, I don't care if you have to break their windows, get these cars out of the way. The first medical fire department that showed up, I'm like, hey, we have officers ready and we're going to get, we have identified victims. I need you guys to get forward to start giving medical attention to those that are injured. So we formed what we call Rescue Task Force, and you have officers with medical. We've all trained together, so we all know to go forward and start giving that medical attention to people that they need. The one subject that was shot by the suspect in the stomach walks out of the building, and one of the officers on scene just scoops him, grabs him, tosses him in the car, and drives him to the hospital, saving his life, rather than sit there and working on him and waiting for medical. And that's always a decision that officers have to make. Is it safer to have medical come and give, first aid, or can I just load them and get them to the hospital as quick as possible? And I remember the doctor saying that probably saved that subject's life. So, in each of these incidents, as tragic and as terrible as they are, there's always these bright points of people stepping up and doing what they need to do to save lives. And that is not always specific to the first responders. Yes, the police officers, the medical personnel, everyone that was willing to risk their own safety to go forward and stop this from continuing saving lives. But there was also a student that was at this incident. And when the shooting started happening in the building and they're trying to get people out and evacuate, there's another lady that was in a wheelchair that she didn't know. And she ended up, I got you, grabbing the wheelchair and wheeling her out to safety, which, put herself at greater risk because, as we talk about, and I've talked about in my book and, some of the blogs on our website, is courage isn't only for first responders or people with a title or a rank or any of that. Normal citizens step up, and we've seen that time and time again in these incidents where normal people are able to navigate the fear and, the danger that they're in to save other people. And so I always try to focus on those as well and not just be so focused on the first responder response and what we can do better and all of that.
So you, as an incident commander, you form a command post, as you explained. You're sending people out, you're sending people forward. So as this is unfolding, the suspect is dead at this point now. So then what's happening at this point?
So because you had so many people that are on scene reporting what's happening, we have a suspect down. We believe to be a suspect. We're kind of running a concurrent investigation at the same time as we're conducting these operations. But we now have to clear out the whole UNLV campus because so many people have called in what they're seeing and what happened. There is a distinct, you have a lot of information, but a lack of verified intelligence, like what's really happening. So to ensure the safety of everybody on this campus, we had to clear every building on this campus. Like somebody had pulled a fire alarm, not the suspect, which added to the chaos, added to communication being stunted. So we're trying to get that, trying to get the fire alarm turned off with the engineers at the school, trying to get a map so I can track what buildings have been cleared, what buildings hadn't. It took us a little bit of time to get a map put up so we can make sure we're clearing everything.
You guys also didn't have keys to unlock any rooms to clear the rooms.
we didn't. And then even when we got keys, not all the keys that we were given worked on every door. So we ended up breaching over 250 doors, like manually breaching and breaking them open. So sorry if it costs more to send your kids to UNLV. Tuition definitely went up at UNLV after this incident. But it really, we didn't have an option. We had to clear out these buildings and let people know that it's safe. And now imagine we have more than 1,000 law enforcement officers respond to this because you had UNLV police, you had Metro, Henderson, North Las Vegas, Marshals, NHP, even DMV apparently had police. There was a DMV police officer responded, something I didn't know that they had.
Did he get there last? Was he as slow as everyone else at the DMV?
I'm sure.
I mean, he came, so that's like at least he showed up and was there, and that's great.
Ready to go. But so then from a command standpoint, to coordinate this large of a response, and it's also an open campus, so it's not necessarily like a mall or a school where I can control all the points of entry. Hey, apparently we have a team on the north side of the campus that's clearing out this building that we didn't know about. It just adds to the difficulty from a command standpoint because I want to know where everybody's at and what they're doing so we can have a more controlled response. But what people I don't think realize is, the suspect was taken out in the first couple minutes of this incident by brave officers responding to doing what they needed to do. But the next 9-10 hours, I was then in the command post, like making decisions. Are we clear? How's the investigation going? Do we have multiple suspects? Are we doing search warrants at the suspect we do have's house to identify if there was any accomplices? Like these can be very complicated responses, and it takes also a mental toll too. So very proud of the officers, medical, even the hospitals, everybody that coordinated to make sure that not only did we stop the suspect, but we gave medical attention to the people that needed it.
Well, and what is the national average for getting medical in after an event like this? And then what was the time here?
So the national average for active shooter events are 40 minutes to get medical in. And on this one, it was 7 minutes. And that was number one. I've been teaching this and know that those are the two main priorities: is how fast you take the suspect out and how fast you get medical in. So that was my priority. So I was able to guide that from a leadership standpoint. And, all of the moving parts in this, everybody also understood the mission, right? Because we've been through it as a community before, as a police department, medical, Clark County Fire, everybody that responded, we knew. So I wasn't getting questioned for my decisions. Oh, we can't do this. They knew why I was asking them to do that, because the longer it takes to get medical in, the higher the body count can be. So again, all the moving parts. And I made mistakes even from a command standpoint. My command post was way too close. It was probably 100 yards from where the building was, where the shooting was. I set up a staging area, which is where all the resources go so I can send them out to different places. So the staging area where you send out all of the resources, that you don't want 100 officers, 200 officers in your command post. I set up a staging area close by, but somebody else set up a second staging area. So there were two. Like there were a lot of these little mistakes that even I made. And here's a secret: you're never going to have a critical incident like this where there aren't some mistakes that are made. It's just the nature of it. But as long as those two things, how quick you can stop the suspect and how quick you can get medical in, happen, that's all that dictates a successful response on these. Everything else are just learning points.
So what would you say, from being a tactical response on 1 October to being an incident commander on this response, just explain maybe how those two things were different?
So as a tactical response, there was definitely more like fear of my own mortality, right? I was in more danger. I had a cart that I thought was going to explode. We have to go into a room for a heavily armed suspect, and that compared to this, the fear of my own mortality wasn't there, but the anxiety was a lot higher because I knew as I got there, all of these decisions are on me. In fact, I talk about my heart rate on the 1 October episode being like 160. On this one, I looked after and I was like around 140 when I got there. And I had to think about that. Why is my heart rate high when I'm not specifically in danger? Well, it's because I knew all eyes were on me when it came to this being a successful response or not. So I worked on my breath work. When I got there, I took some deep breaths. I did some box breathing. I took a physical step back to try and get a wider view of what I was seeing. Like, because I had been teaching this class that we teach, the class that we've been teaching around the country before this. So I had the tools and I knew in my head what I needed to do to calm myself. So it was a lot easier to get my emotions in check on this one than it was in the last one.
So Josh goes around the country teaching a class called Police Resiliency and Critical Incident Mindset. And we do that through our business, Bitsko Consulting. And that class is to help officers understand the emotions that you're going to feel during a critical incident. So fear, anxiety, vapor lock, which we call tactical paralysis, and tools and methods to use during a critical incident or a high stress scenario to help you be able to mitigate those emotions in the moment and still perform at your best. And this, yes, we teach the law enforcement, but this can also be used by anybody in any high stress or critical situation. If you're an ER doctor, if you're a dentist, if you're, a teacher, teachers are, I think, in stress all day, every day. Correct me if I'm wrong, teachers, but I would imagine that it's high stress all day. So he had been teaching this class around the country already. And so that's really cool to me that you were able to use some of what you teach, or maybe all of what you teach in this moment.
A lot of it for sure. And then the other part of that class is what we talk about is how to process these things afterwards. And that, I think, is something I tried to fall into old habits after this, because I spent the next 8 hours dealing with the command posts and the investigation. It was a 15, 16-hour day.
Like he talked about, was clearing all the rooms, making sure there were no other suspects, making sure, sending people out to the suspect's residence, right? Was there anything else?
Dealing with the media, dealing with everything that comes, like communication up. So, my chain of command knew what was going on. Making sure this is going to go into multiple operational periods. We're going to have to secure UNLV for the weekend or the next several days that happen. Like all of these different things that were happening. It doesn't just stop because the suspect stopped from a command standpoint. So, and I was there and I'm like, I'm going to see this through. And, I think it was like 10 o'clock that night. I was like, okay, I can go home. I left the lieutenant in charge of the rest and came home. And that's where I'm talking about. I was good at mitigating my emotions in the moment on this, but when it came down to handling it after, I could have done a lot better. And I actually had you to kind of check me on that.
Well, he got home and he was visibly upset, obviously, after something like this where lives were lost and another active shooter. I mean, I don't think that you ever anticipated having to go through something like that ever again. And so, it just was it was very heavy. And he came home and the second he walked in the door, it was like just this weight was like falling off and he started to cry. And I think just the gravity of everything just kind of hit him because he was able to kind of let that go a little bit the second that he walked in the door. Just being the incident commander over one of these is, you've got to be strong. You have to make 1,000 decisions, right?
Oh, and you still feel the weight of it, right? And the loss. And it brings up old emotions of other things that I've been on. And and you were amazing. You were there for me in that moment. And then I'm like, okay, but I need to go back in and talk to Graveyard and talk to the officers and start doing this because it's old patterns, right? Is I need to work to not feel these bad things that I'm feeling right now.
And so the next morning did you go into Graveyard that night? I don't remember.
I ended up not because we had sent the clinicians out.
Okay. Well, the next morning gets up and he starts showering like he's going to go to work. And I'm like, what are you doing? he's like, well, I got to go in. I need to talk to the officers and I need to make sure they're okay. And I need to, make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing. And I just said, well, what about you? What about what you need? What about what you need to be doing for you? And, we kind of had a back and forth for a little while because there was a crossroads, I think, of duty and obligation to what he felt like he needed to do for the department in that moment, and then himself. And he had been going around and teaching our class, and part of what he talks about in that class is how after the 1 October shooting, there wasn't a lot of aftercare. Nobody was given time off of work. Nobody was, at the very bare minimum, Josh, Levi, and the other people that were on the team that breached that door should have been given time off to mentally process, to go see a clinician. There should have been a lot of things that happened that didn't. So I'm going to say it, and this is my podcast, so write me a letter if you don't like it. But they should never have been at work after that. When you go through an officer-involved shooting, you are mandated to be off of work. So why, during the biggest mass shooting in United States history, was nobody mandated to be off of work? I'm not saying the entire department. That wouldn't have been feasible. But some people should have been. Anyways, so he goes around and he's teaching our class. And part of what he talks about in that class is after an active shooter, after an event like this, there should be a triage of officers that, are involved. They should be given time off work. They should be mandated to go see a clinician. There should be all of these things happening if we truly care about the wellness of our first responders. And so after this, event happens and he tells me he's going to go into work, we had a back and forth. And I said, respectfully, no, you're not.
You did. Very respectfully.
Well, I had to tell him that I was going to call his chief and tell his chief that he was not coming in if he did not do it himself, because he was in no state to be working at that point.
And it was a really good thing because I called my boss. I'm like, hey, I just need today. And it was leading into the weekend. And I, stayed home, took time to actually process it, set up an appointment with my therapist, like to work through what I've been through. And in that mitigated the damage that it would have done to me to not, because I've done that in the past. So, with this incident, there were just so many many things were repeated from the 1 October incident, where there were stories of bravery of, the first responders and citizens stepping up and saving lives. And, like anything else, also learning from it, learning about, mistakes that we made, and certain things were replicated. Like there were ghost calls on this where, you had people calling in well-intended that, hey, there's a guy with a rifle over by this building. And I remember thinking, okay, that's probably a ghost call. I don't think that's legitimate. So I said on the radio, hey, let me know if you get any more calls on that. That's probably a ghost call. We have stuff to do in the main building we have to do, and I don't have the resources to send over there. But inside, I was like, I hope I'm right about that one. And it turned out it was a ghost call, but there's so many things replicated, and it was good for me to be able to go through it and maybe not make the same mistakes I did on the last time, both tactically, operationally, and then emotionally afterwards. So I was able to come through it stronger, even when you're adding this traumatic incident into all the other ones that I've been through, and come through on the other end of it better than I would have had I repeated old patterns that I had done in the past.
What do you think is the biggest takeaway for you from this event? What did you take away that you feel helped you personally or helped you grow in any kind of way?
So operationally, like making the decisions, as hard as it was, as much pressure, that's something that I know, something that I've done. More so, it was taking the time for myself after and realizing that, yes, it's going to affect me. These things are going to affect anybody that responds to a critical incident like this. But you can mitigate the damage done by taking care of yourself after. And you helped me see that, because getting into operational mode, sometimes you don't think about those things. So for me, it was, when I look at the different things that I've been involved in and the impact that they had on me mentally and emotionally, this one isn't as up there as other ones because I took the time afterwards, and I was able to repeat that in my own self. Like,
But it wasn't even just taking the time. You also did what you needed to do, as far as you went and met with your therapist a couple times, and you were able to sit and process through the big emotions that you were feeling after that, some of the guilt that you were carrying. I mean, you were able to kind of nip that in the bud very quickly before it grew and festered into a bigger issue.
well, and I would say the biggest thing that, you talked about is I came home and cried with you. Like, I actually allowed myself to feel those emotions rather than push them down. And I'm still am, and was lucky to have you through this, to where you knew, you know me, and you knew that it was going to impact me, and you gave me the space for that. So thank you. If I didn't thank you then, thank you now.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece of this, is that if you're home and your partner is, you're on something like this, or you're not a first responder and you experience a really tragic, life altering event, if your partner is not your safe space, if you're not able to go home and cry and just kind of unload all of that, then and someone that is, and I'm not talking about like divorce or cheating or anything like that. I'm saying find a friend, find a therapist, find a family member, find somebody that you can be that person for you, because I think that's so critical, because you didn't always have that. And we know a lot of people that still don't have that. And I think that makes life and traumatic events that much harder to go through and carry. We have a good friend right now that's in the middle of a divorce, and we get to be that safe space. And so please, if you don't have that in near proximity in your home, then reach out to somebody that you know can be that for you.
Yep, absolutely. There's going to be somebody in your life that loves you, that cares about you, that's going to be there for you. So, well, I think that wraps up the podcast today. Thank you for spending your time with us. If you like the podcast, if you liked what we talked about today, please subscribe, download, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We, again, appreciate you spending some time with us.
See you next week.